Zach Laws of Gold Derby here with Pablo Helman. He's the visual effects supervisor of Martin Scorsese's new film, The Irishman. And Pablo, obviously the big story about this movie is how you returned Robert De Niro and Al Pacino and Joe Pesci to their younger selves. I have to wonder, what did you think the first time you realized the sheer extent of what you would be up against with this film?
Well, the first time I thought about it, it was a mixture of boy, we're in trouble. This is a very risky move for all of us. But I first talked to Marty about this movie in Taiwan in 2015. We were talking about maybe pushing the technology towards creating a younger actor, and Marty said, "Hey, I have the great project that is perfect for this. I'll send you the script." And he sent it to me overnight, and I read it overnight. So that was 170 pages. And in the morning we were shooting Silence. I just talked to him and I said, "Look, we're in." I hadn't talked to ILM yet about it, but I knew that we were going to be in. So we decided, well, why don't we just go back to New York after the shoot and then talk about it. At the same time, I got on the phone with ILM and I said, "Yeah, we have the perfect project. This is a dream project for visual effects because it's a movie that is all about performances. It's all about content." And we're going to get incredible performances because you have three incredible actors. And first everybody was like very quiet, and the phone was like, "I'm not sure about this," And then I talked to Dennis Muren. I don't know if you know Dennis, but Dennis, yeah. So I figured, he has an office right next to mine, and we always talk, and he's been a great friend. And so I told him about it, and I said, "I don't know, Pablo." He says, "This is very risky." And I said, "Do you remember when you did Jurassic Park? Didn't you feel this way?" And he just looked at me and said, "Okay, you're right. We should do this." So anyway, that's how the whole thing started. After that, I talked to Marty about, when we get back to New York, we should do a test because we were all wondering how we're going to do it. Part of the problem was that Marty said, Bob De Niro and me, and Marty, we're not going to go for those marker things that you have in your face and a huge, helmet cam and, all this other stuff. And we're not going to dress like great pajamas and things like that. So you're going to have to come up with a technology to do that. And so that's when, the whole ILM R&D department came in. About 30 people, just working, coding and just thinking about how we're going to do this. So in the meantime, we went back to New York. We did a test of basically a scene, the pink Cadillac scene from Goodfellas. Mm-hmm. And here comes Bob, 74 years old, and reenacts that scene. And we, in about 10 weeks, we turned the test around, and he looked like Goodfellas, like 45, 50. And that greenlit the movie.
Well, so I have to wonder, knowing that you weren't going to be able to do what you normally do in terms of the little dots and the helmets and all that stuff, what did you do as a solution? What was your alternative?
Right. Well, I think the good news about working at ILM is that you're working with a bunch of people that are very curious, and we're always pushing the envelope. So basically, we all sat down on a table and we said, well, if we cannot use markers, what do we have left? So we have left the person who is in front of the camera, who is in 3D space, and we have lighting, and we have textures. So we came up with a system to capture the performance based on the lighting and the textures. And I know it sounds a little bit like an NASA project, but basically we are creating what we call geometry, which is a rendering, a 3D rendering of the face based on the lighting and the textures. And it takes a look at the performance, one frame, and he compares it to a model of the digital double actor that we have built, and then it deforms the geometry, or what we call the mesh, and then he does that for one frame, and then he looks at the other frame and it does the same thing, and then the other frame, and then so that is basically the way we did it. Now, to do that, we had to come up with a completely different way to capture those performances. We came up with working with Rodrigo Prieto and with Ari cameras in Los Angeles. We came up with a 3-camera rig. So the center camera would be the director camera, where Marty is taking a look at the performances, and then to the left and right, we had 2 Ari Mini, Alexa Mini cameras, which are film grade cameras that capture the performance, but in infrared light. Mm. And the reason why that is because the software, based on lighting and texture, has a little bit of a problem between highlights and darks. Right? We all have shadows and things like that. So the infrared cameras are throwing infrared light onto the characters, and they are getting rid of the shadows. Mm. And so the software takes those 3 cameras and triangulates whatever the cameras are seeing and creates geometry. I know it sounds complicated, and it is, but the whole purpose of this was to take the technology and the burden away from the actors and from the director. You see, with no markers, the actors just show up on set and with the lighting on the set, and they act with somebody else. If you think about 2015, everybody was doing markers. I mean, including myself in other projects, markers and helmet cams and all this other stuff. And we would take the actors into a completely controlled environment where we were controlling the lights and the space. So the actor couldn't act with somebody else because there was not enough room. And even if it was with somebody else, the set is missing, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we found out is that research tells us that whatever the eyes are doing, the body does. Mm. So by putting these 2 actors or 3 actors or however many actors you have on set with the lighting, they're in the truest, most moment. It's this truth that the actors are looking for, right? So they are in the moment, and they look at each other. So there's a connection. The main problem for us in visual effects is usually the eye connection. Mm-hmm. So the actors are on set. They have a connection, and also, I don't know if you notice this, but when you're with somebody, you're always checking that the other person is understanding what you're saying. Right, you're looking for clues and things like that. So that's part of their acting. So they're checking each other. They're also checking the set around, and then they come back to the person who is in front of them. All that, makes for a performance to be, incredible. And they're actually credible, which is what we're looking for. So that is the reason why this is such an important step. It's a kind of a natural thing in visual effects that we kind of step on each other's shoulders, to get to where we need to be. And naturally, we started all this technology, 15 years ago with tracking markers and all this other stuff. And then little by little, we are getting to the point where tracking markers are not important anymore. Mm-hmm. And the achievement, I think, is to have the burden lifted out of the performers, out of the actors. And then I can't wait for the other actors to take a look at this movie and say, wait a minute, does that mean I don't have to have 138 markers on my face, and I don't have to spend 2 hours of makeup, and I don't have to do calibration of cameras and all kinds of stuff that we in visual effects need? But now it's completely separate from the act of performing.
I've seen the movie multiple times now, and, each time I think it's a credit to your work that you have a really hard time discerning when, the technology stops being used, or if it stops being used at all. Can you talk, did you have to plan out ahead of time how you were what kind of incremental steps you're going to take to, like, after you've de-aged them, to gradually age them?
Yes, I mean, I think one of the things that is about this movie is that that Marty was that's Marty's vision, right? That we are not recreating these actors as they were when they were younger, 30 years younger. This is a new creation. I mean, he did the same thing that he always does, which is he designed a character. So if we don't see Robert De Niro exactly like he was 30 years ago, it's because he's being, Frank Sheeran young, not necessarily Robert De Niro young. I mean, Marty wanted to rewind 30 years and not see Jimmy Conway, from Goodfellas. It's the same as if you think about, what Bob did with Al Capone, on Untouchables. I mean, he gained weight, he lost some hair, and he became Al Capone. It's the same as if you're seeing Al Capone first and you're saying, oh, wait a minute, he doesn't look like, Deer Hunter. Why is that? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So yes, there was a design phase of this that was pretty long because you're basically covering about 30, 40 years of somebody's life, and it's very difficult to do it unless you're actually seeing it. So the process is such that we first create a digital double that is contemporary to the actor's age. So in this case, Robert De Niro 76, Joe Pesci 76, Al Pacino 78. And then we basically de-age them to the youngest, and then we do variations of a model that correspond to the targeted age in the script. And then we basically do art, and we show this in stills to Marty, and then he picks different things. But then we start working with the movie, and then things kind of change depending on how Marty feels about it. Mm-hmm. It's like a puzzle. You're putting all these pieces together. And being that this show had like 1,750 shots or something like that, I mean, this was like 2.5 hours of work. You can't produce that amount of work for scope, in very short time. I mean, our post time was like about 9 months, and he never changed, by the way. I heard all these people saying, it just takes so long, and they're behind. That's why the movie is being delayed. That time never changed. We never really varied from the time that we said we were going to be done. It's just that it was such an extensive 3.5 hour movie that I took us that long just to get it done with 500 people, all over the world. And so throughout the process of putting this puzzle together, it's a puzzle that you adjust. It's not maybe you said you final, what we call final the shot. We stop working on it. There's no really finaling, to be honest. It's basically just doing the work and saying, okay, well, this is good enough. Let's just stop right here and let's just keep working. And then if we need to come back, we'll come back. And it's a process of readjusting everything. And then on top of that, the technology that we were writing was changing. This was like, running the Grand Prix while you're building the Ferrari, and then you're pushing it down the track. And then at some point you're going to have to jump on it and then start running. And then, for 9 months, we did a bunch of things, and things were looking great. And some other stuff, we were looking at it, and we were, it's a process of recreating, your vision, and redesigning the characters. And that's, I think, one of the things that Marty was alluding to in the middle of this process, that it was difficult for all of us. It's the process, right? I mean, and filmmaking is a process. It's the same as if you went to the set, and Marty said, and he's doing take 8, and then you go to Marty and say, "What's the matter with you? Take 8? Does that mean you don't like what you're doing?" But not really. It's a process of finding what it is. Otherwise, Marty would shoot one take, and then he would move on. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it was a combination of finding these characters and finding the performances and the reasons why Marty had chosen a specific performance. He's used to seeing these people for 50 years. Mm-hmm. So it's the same. I told Marty one time because he was saying, but then we take the wrinkles away, and I don't feel this way, or I feel this other way. And I said, well, it's like you live in this apartment for 50 years, and you have all this furniture that is always there for 50 years, and then I take all the furniture away, and then you go like, well, this is not my apartment. Well, actually, it is your apartment. It just has different furniture.
Right.
I mean, it's such an incredible project for us because it allowed us to have conversations with Marty about visual effects in a completely different level. Mm-hmm. I mean, we talked about performances. We talked about what makes a performance. What makes it feel in a specific way, and you're also deconstructing all these things. Because now you're starting to understand, in shots like, forehead to chin, what De Niro or Pesci are doing with the chin, and or the nose, or how they're moving their eyebrows, independently from each other. And how the hell do they do that? Yeah. You know what I mean? It's a study on humanity that we all welcome, because it's a completely different show than what we've been doing. I mean, I've been in Ireland for 24 years, and I don't think I've ever done a show, like this.
Before I let you go, you're a previous Oscar nominee for your work on War of the Worlds and Star Wars: Attack of the Clones. Very different movies from the kind of visual effects work you were doing on this movie. What did that recognition mean for you?
Well, it's always great to be recognized for what you're doing, but basically, you're working to show your work to an audience. It's the reason why we all came to work at ILM. To invent things, to be innovative, but ultimately we came here to tell stories. And whether I have seen the movie in premieres or something like that, I always sneak in the back of a theater to see how people react to what we try to do. Sometimes you get like completely different reactions. And so for me, recognition is great, but it's basically it's the fact that that you want the majority of people to like what you're doing. Mm-hmm. This is the closest I've ever been to art, in that there is no real compromise here. This is the director's vision, and we all jump on it and make it a reality. Yeah.
Well, it's a remarkable movie and a remarkable feat of visual effects work. I think we can all safely say we've never really seen any visual effects work quite like this. And I think you're saying to Dennis Muren, if you got the same feeling from when you were working on Jurassic Park as you did working on this one, I think that's an apt comparison. Pablo, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations on your work.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.